This tutorial is going to focus on how you can clean and score and check the reliability of the data that you have recently downloaded after collecting data on a platform such as Qualtrics or Gorilla or SurveyMonkey or anything like that. So in terms of the data we have quite a bit of data actually, but I'm specifically looking at two scales. One is a scale that has 20 items, and that is the Mach 4 scale, which is a test of Machiavellianism. So how essentially, do you view the world as inherently good or people as inherently quite unscrupulous? And then the other scale I'm going to be looking at is the Tippy 10, which is their 10 item personality inventory. So extroversion, neuroticism, and so on and so forth. We have some other variables that we might use in a different tutorial, but it's not important for this particular one. Right. So the first point is that some of these items are reversed scored. That means that if you're measuring a certain construct, such as Machiavellianism, some of the items or statements are phrased in such a way that the response is actually the inverse of the concept. For instance, if we are measuring happiness, question A or question 1 would be, I often feel happy, rating from 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree, where 5 represents increased levels of happiness. So if we had another item, or the second item being, I often feel sad, then participants who rate very strongly agree on that one would have a higher score, but that kind of is the inverse of the happiness scale that we're measuring. So we would reverse that one so that all of the scores, so 5 would become 1, 4 would become 2, and so on and so forth. So higher levels on that, or higher responses on that item, represents lower levels on the construct that we're measuring. So for example, the Machiavellianism, or the Mach 4 as I'm going to call it from now on because that word's too long, has 20 items, and about 9 of these items are reversed scored. So before we can do anything, we need to reverse score those particular items so that higher levels represent higher levels of Machiavellianism and lower levels represent lower levels of Machiavellianism. Okay? So generally in a scale, you would have some type of indicator of which items need to be reversed. Interestingly, I couldn't find one for this Mach 4 scale, but if this is the case for you, you simply need to read through the statements and see which direction a higher level of response, such as strongly agree, would indicate whether it loads onto the construct of interest or should be reversed. For instance, you can tell question 1, never tell anyone the real reason you did something unless it is useful to do so. Okay, so that is pretty easily interpreted as higher levels on this response represent higher levels of Machiavellianism. However, question 3 and all the subsequently highlighted ones represent a kind of inverse on the construct of Machiavellianism. For instance, one should take action only when sure it is morally right. Okay? The definition of Machiavellianism is to kind of disregard morals and only do what benefits you. Therefore, higher responses on this score represent the inverse or the reverse of high levels of Machiavellianism. So we need to reverse score all of these items. So question 3, 4, 6, 7, 9 to 11, 14, 16, and 17. Okay, so one way to do that is to simply go to transform, then you go to recode into the same variables, because I don't want additional variables. I just want the variables that I have to be recoded. If you want to go into recode as new variables, then you would have an additional layer of columns for each of the reverse items. And you can do that to kind of double check, but for my method, or for what I'm doing here, we simply need to include the reversed items, or the items that need to be reversed, and then those specific variables will be reversed items or reverse scored, and we leave it as that. So we got question 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 14, 16, and 17. So if you want to select all of them, you just kind of hold down Control while you click, and then you can just drag them all over to the numeric variables, and otherwise just do them one by one. It's fine. So see old and new values, that's what we're going to click here. And because this scale is on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree, we need to kind of reverse code all of those numbers. So the old value 5 would become 1, the old value 4 would become 2, 3 remains 3, and it's important that this is actually included, because if you just assume that what's left over will be the same, that would be the wrong assumption. Otherwise, everything that's coded as 3 will be missing data. So don't forget about that. So 2 will become 4, and then 1 will become 5. Right? So you can see, double check here. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how it's done. You are reverse coded, or they are reverse coded. You don't need to do anything else. Don't worry about if. It's not important for this particular point. And then we click OK. So so question 3. So 5 should become 1 and 1 should become 5. So just double check in these particular rows how it should be, and get some data. Close that for now. The 5 will become 1 and 1 will become 5. That's what we got. So that means the reverse score is complete and successful. So we have another inventory, which is, or another test, the TP, and this one is a little bit different because there are certain subscales in that. So we're going to be kind of calculating the subscales representing these specific constructs. Right. So in this one, it actually tells us exactly what needs to be reverse scored, which is nice and always preferable to having to determine yourself. So here we can see that 6 is reverse scored, 2 is reverse scored, 8 is reverse scored because with the R, 4 is reverse scored, and 10 is reverse scored. Okay, so essentially 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. There we go. Every even number. Nice to remember. And this one has a 7-point scale, so it's important that you know the extent of your scale. So here we go. 1 needs to become 7, and 7 needs to become 1 for all of these particular items here. Okay, so let's go on and do that. So same process. So we go to transform, recode into the same variables, get rid of these, and now we add in, so we had 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 being reverse scored. Add those in here, old and new values. So now we need to kind of redo some of them. You can either edit them as they are now, or you can just kind of change them from starting fresh. I'm just going to do that to make sure that there's no error. So 7 becomes 1, 6 becomes 2, 5 becomes 3, 4 becomes 4, because it's the middle number, 3 becomes 5, 2 becomes 6, and 1 becomes 7. Okay, double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, that is done. And click OK. Right, so now that we have all of our reverse scores done, we can then proceed to looking at the reliability of the items, because you always look at the reliability measured in this case by Cronbach's alpha, So essentially, Cronbach's alpha, which we're looking at, ranges from the level of agreement between the items from 0 to 1, and higher values indicate higher agreement. So essentially, these items are measuring the same thing, or if it's a lower value, you can see that these items are not measuring the same thing. So essentially, higher reliability is better. If you have an alpha of above 9, it's considered to be excellent internal consistency. 8 to 9 is good. 7 to 8 is acceptable. 6 or 0.6 to 0.7 is questionable. 0.5 to 0.6 is poor, and anything below 0.5 is really considered to be an unacceptable level of reliability. And this probably not a very good measure of the construct that you're looking at. So to investigate this, we would go to scale reliability analysis and simply add, so the Mach 5 or Mach 4 scale is a single item scale. There are some subsets, but we're not looking at those at the moment. It can be looked at simply as a unitary construct measuring the level of Machiavellianism in a participant. So we're going to include all 20 items into the item box. Statistics, so you don't really need to look at it, but I'm just going to explain some of them to you so you can get the descriptives for each item and scale, so the mean, standard deviation, etc. If you have a particularly weak scale, then you can click this button here which says scale if item is deleted. So essentially, if this particular item on the scale is removed, what would the resulting Cronbach alpha be? Yeah, so we're not going to worry about that now. Okay, I'll show you for fun. So you don't need to worry about any of this other stuff. Just make sure that in the model here that you're clicking alpha. There are multiple options to measure reliability. I'm just going with alpha at the moment. It's relatively standardized. That's the kind of measure of reliability that's often used. Okay, so click OK. And here we can see that the reliability, this is what you can see the number of items or number of participants that have been included, data points included. The reliability statistic is really what you're interested in here. So it's 0.894, which is a good verging on excellent reliability. And it has a total of 20 items in the scale. So what I meant by Cronbach's alpha if deleted, so you can see if question 1 was deleted, the Cronbach's alpha would be 0.887. If question 19 was deleted, it will be 0.893. So really there's really not much variation in terms of if a specific item was deleted. They all do pretty well. In fact, I don't think there's any item that would, if deleted, would increase the overall reliability. Actually, there is. No, there isn't. Never mind. So really, it's a pretty good scale. It's reliable, and the items all measure the same construct, which is Machiavellianism. Now, if I were to run this reliability analysis without having reverse scored my items, it would show something horrendous like 0.2 or something like that, because half of the items are measuring non-Machiavellianism traits and the other half are measuring Machiavellianism traits. Okay, that's why reverse scoring is really important. Okay, so we can also do the same. It's always good to report either as a descriptive or in your method section. Now we do the same with the TP. So we can see here again, looking exactly what we need to measure. So items 6 and 1 after being reversed measure extroversion. So let's do that one. Analyze, scale, reliability analysis. 6 and 1, so 1 and 6. Measure extroversion, so how reliable are these items? It's only 2 items really, so it's not much you can remove if it's not very reliable. But it does, oh, that's not very good after all. So it has 0.668, It's not the most reliable. In fact, it probably should be a bit better, but let's see how the others fare in this case. So analyze scale reliability. So for agreeableness, it's 2 and 7. 2 and 7. Let's have a look. That's really not good at all. 0.396. And let's have a look at conscientiousness. 3 and 8. 0.568. Slightly better. Emotional stability. Let's have a look. So that would be 4 and 9. 0.708. Okay, so we're getting a little bit better as we go along. And finally, let's have a look at, 5 and 10 for openness to new experiences. Also not very good. Okay, of course these only have 2 items for each construct, so obviously the more items you have, the more kind of flexibility you have in calculating it, and whether they both all represent a certain construct. So that scale is, well, it could be better. Hopefully, maybe it's just because of the data we're using that it's not the most reliable. It is an online data set, so it's quite possible that participants were not paying full attention to the questions. Luckily for us, the Machiavellianism score is the Machiavellianism scale is very reliable. So now we want to actually calculate. So Machiavellianism, the Mach 4 scale, is calculated by just summing up all of the responses, and the sum of the responses represents the level of Machiavellianism in this particular participant. Okay, so to do that, we would go to transform compute variable, and simply we would just add all of these together. So we go, I'm going to call the target variable Mach sum, because it is the sum of all the Mach items. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7, and you just keep going along with this until you have all 20 items. And there we go. Right, so Mach sum would be summing all of these, so you can just kind of double check that all of the items are included, there's no double pluses, and click OK. Alright, so if we wanted to have a look at this Mach 4 score, it will be all the way at the end here, and you can see each participant that has completely answered the scale will have a sum of Machiavellianism, representing their predisposition to have Machiavellianism traits based on their responses to the items. As far as I know, anything below 80 represents low Mach, and anything over 80 represents high Mach. But of course, you don't want to categorize data when you have a scale format. Continuous data is always better than categorical data. So we'll leave it as that. And then we would, of course, get the scores for our individual personality types. So compute variables. And for this case, I want to try and do a mean score rather than a sum score, just to demonstrate how that's done. So essentially we have extroversion, so I'm going to call it extra. I'm going to open parentheses, and I'm going to, first in the parentheses, I'm going to sum it, and I'm going to divide it by the total number of items included. So that would simply be 2 in this case. So extroversion is TP1 plus TP6 divided by 2. Whoop. So if you get the average, then you would include all of the items that you're first summing in the parentheses, and then divide it by the total number of items included. If I was to do the Mach 4 scale, I would include the sum in the parentheses and then divide by 20. Okay, so now I have extroversion at the end there. The higher levels represent higher levels of extroversion. lower levels, of course, represent the inverse of extroversion, which is, the inverse of extroversion, which is introversion. Alright? So, I'm going to do the rest for the other scales. So, let's go for transform compute variable. I'm going to call this, oh no, just leave that there. Okay, it's gone. Agreeableness, agree. So, open parentheses, TP2 plus TP7, and we can tell this from the scale information. If you don't know what the subscales are of a scale, find that. You don't want to kind of do it intuitively as I demonstrated with the Mach4 scale, right? So TP2 plus TP7 divided by 2 gives us our agreeableness. Same thing here, so transform compute. Let's go conscientiousness, they call it that because I'm lazy. So that was 3. Nope, TP3 plus TP8 after being reverse scored, of course. Then 2 more times. Emotional stability, I'm going to call it emotion. That is TP4 plus TP9. And then finally, openness to new experiences is TP5 and TP10. Alright, so now after all that is done, you have the scales, or the scoring of the scales that you need to compute further data analysis. So we have our Mach sum, and then we have our personality types. So extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and openness to new experiences. Okay, so if you wanted to perhaps look at the descriptive statistics of these, so the mean, median, mode, range, etc., you'd go to Analyze, Descriptive Stats, Descriptives, include these items over here, drop it in there. If you want to have a look at exactly what options you want to get, you can get the mean, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, variance, range, etc. Range is always pretty good. And then click OK. And then this will give you a table demonstrating the range of scores. So the minimum, maximum, the mean, and the standard deviation. Alright, so that's it for this particular video. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to be doing some more videos on the kind of testing the assumptions for multiple regression. So if that's what you're doing, check those out and follow the kind of growth of this analysis. Thanks for watching, and see you around.